Beloved, welcome to the Overcomers Initiative podcast, where our goal is to help you overcome the power of pornography in your life and to give you some encouragement on your journey towards victory and eventual overcoming. I'm your host, Phil King. I am glad that you have decided to take a listen to this third installment of this podcast. I figured now would be a good time, since I have equipped myself with some more technology and tools to increase the production quality of this podcast, to rehash exactly what the purpose is for this podcast, what brought me here to make this thing, why we're here, and tell you a little bit more about myself and about the plan that I have referenced. Before we get too far into it, just understand that my primary target audience is going to be young Christian men who are battling with this thing and maybe feel, I guess, how I felt when I was younger and in church. There's you kind of feel like there's a stigma around this stuff, and it's too shameful for you to bring up, because if word gets out that you watch this stuff, ooh, you're filthy and you're damaged goods. And to be quite honest, that's probably an over-exaggeration of what actually would happen. But at the same time, that feeling of shame, which I did deal with in the second episode, can really be a barrier into it can be a barrier to actually seeking help and talking about this stuff, and that just leads to this thing just festering in the dark, and that's where it likes to grow. And you will not get any help, you will not get any victory over this thing without bringing it out into the open to deal with it. So just keep that in mind. Primary target audience is going to be young Christian men. But if that is not you, please don't let that scare you off from this podcast. My goal is to help you as well. This plan, I believe, works. It's worked for me. I believe it can work for you regardless of who you are. So please stick around, give the plan a try. If you're just fed up with watching this stuff and you'd like to stop, give the plan a try. Don't be scared off by you not being a good Christian boy, so to speak. Just understand that some of the terms I may use may be unfamiliar to you. I will be referencing the Bible a lot, so now may be a good chance to go ahead and pull the Bible that you may have in your bedside table out from under all the stuff that's in the drawer. Bust that out, go get you one, or download a Bible app. It'll really help you follow along in what I'm talking about and the stories that I'm telling. But just keep that in mind as we move forward about the target audience. Again, the reason that I started this podcast is I'll get a little bit more into my testimony in a while, but I found myself raised in church. You could call me a good Christian boy. I was sheltered. This stuff still managed to worm its way into my life and wouldn't let me go. Had its claws in me for a long time. And there were times when I wanted to say something. I wanted to bring it forward, but at the same time, who do I bring it to? Will they think less of me for that? Will I be marred in such a way as to, are they just going to look different at me? And that's just kind of how I felt, and I didn't want to risk that, so I never said anything. And then on top of that, we would have preachers get up and they would offer a more preventative challenges. Don't even touch it. Don't even look at it. Don't even start. And that's all well and good. And if you've just found this podcast by chance and you haven't watched porn, well, good for you. Don't even start. But for those of us that have, my question was, well, I already have opened that can of worms. I've opened that door. What do I do now? How do I stop? There was never really any of that growing up. And so my goal with this podcast is to be the one that will tell you, okay, you're here. I don't think any less of you. Here's how we can get out. Here's what you can do now. And to be a resource that you can reach out to without fear of shame or reprisal. Most likely, I'm not going to know who you are. You're not going to know who I am, but I've walked this road. I'm here to help. If you'd like to reach out, you can. I'll have contact information in the description of this episode. I'll also list it at the end of this episode. But that's the reason. I want to give those who will listen a community of shame-free sharing and hope. And I want to give you a plan to overcome. And the plan that I've developed was a long time coming. Didn't really take long to develop or come up with initially. It took a little bit of some fine-tuning and some tweaking. But I really believe it works, and we'll get into that in just a second. But for now, just a little bit of how I got here. Again, I was raised in church, raised in a good Christian home. I had good moral values that were taught to me growing up. Was in a good church, very supported, but this stuff just has a way of worming its way into the lives of I feel really everybody. I find it very rare, if not non-existent, to find a person, especially a man, who has not had to deal with pornography in some way or another, whether that's as involved as paying for going onto websites or just going onto Pornhub for free, or even if it's just walking through the undergarments section in the store. We all deal with some level of our own personal lust. And sometimes we allow ourselves to be brought under captivity by that lust, and that's what happened to me. Mostly it just started with my own curiosity. Fairly normal story, was exposed to this stuff around the age of 13, 14, and my own curiosity drove my appetite at first. And you hear it a lot. There's always the horror of, oh my goodness, what have I done? But at the same time, what was that? I feel really bad, but I'm very intrigued. I think I liked it. What's going on? And you just keep going back and keep going back, and that was me. Now, I was fortunate enough to live in a household where ready access to pornography was very, extremely limited. Basically, what I had to do was wait until my mom left her computer unlocked or open or something like that. That's the only time that I had access really to the internet at large, period. And so I was fortunate in that. But there are, as I have discovered, ways around everything. And that has followed me. What I've discovered about myself is that I can be extremely creative in negative ways. And we'll get into this a little bit later as well, but trust me, if there is a way to get around barriers, if there is a way to get access to things that you ought not have access to, I've been there. I know where to find it. I know what words to put in there. So trust me, I've been around the block, and that will manifest itself a little bit in the plan. You'll hear the plan and you'll think, why are you being so extreme? Trust me, there is definitely a reason. But long story short, porn had its claws in me for about 13 years of my life. And really, I was addicted. It wasn't to the point where it took over my life, but it was to the point where if I had the means and I had the opportunity, I would do it. And then I would feel bad and I would promise not to do it again until the next day I had the means and then I had the opportunity, and so I would do it. And there comes a point where you just get so sick of the way that you've been, you don't want to deal with that anymore. And that's where I found myself. I knew I needed to stop. I was married. I had a child on the way. I knew that I did not want my son to be exposed to the same things that I was. If anything, I would be doubly careful with raising him, but at the same time, how am I supposed to be able to do that if I don't have victory over this myself? And so that really started me on this journey of how do I gain true victory? And it can't just be, I knew it couldn't just be me wanting to do so very badly. I knew it couldn't be just me wanting to turn over a new leaf. It had to be something that there was no workaround for. Because if there was a workaround, I was going to find it. I would be bored one day and I would just put around on my phone or whatever and find a way around the roadblocks that I put in. So I knew I needed something drastic. And that led me to one day I was at work and did it again, came back out, felt terrible. I had things to do. I had told myself I wasn't going to do this anymore. What's wrong with me? Why can't I stop? And at the time, I was doing some piecework. It was at my own pace, and I could turn half of my brain off and still be able to do what I needed to do. And so I would occupy the other half of my brain by listening to podcasts or whatever. And at the time, I was listening to the Dave Ramsey Show. Now, if you know anything about Dave Ramsey, he is a finance guru fella who people will call in, and he gives them plans to build wealth and get out of debt and all that good stuff. And it hit me all of a sudden that I've been trying to fight this fight without a plan. And the absurdity of that hit me like a ton of bricks, because I had recently moved, and before I had moved, I was what you might call a gym rat. And I knew enough about going to the gym to know that you don't just go into the gym and pick up heavy things and put them down and expect results. You need a plan. Failure to plan is planning to fail. And it just hit me, I need a plan. What can my plan be? What do I do? And so I stopped what I was doing. I went to my bench and I wrote down a plan. And I'm going to read what I wrote to you that day. I still have this piece of paper. The first thing is to install Covenant Eyes on all devices and surround yourself with good accountability partners. Number 2 is set up a brick phone, or at least no browsers or app store. And we'll go into detail in this later. Parental controls, PIN, a password, set up and kept by an accountability partner. Remove all potential problem sources, movies, games, etc. And then give yourself time to rewire and heal. And probably most importantly, no social media. There can be no social media. Now that will kind of just fall into place as we go down this plan. But I'm going to go into detail on this real quick. So Covenant Eyes is a porn blocking software. And if you have iPhone, it will connect it. It will have an extension to Safari, so you can use Safari. And what it will do is it has an AI algorithm that takes screenshots of what you're doing on your phone. And it sends those screenshots through its AI, and the AI looks at the screenshot to determine whether or not what you're looking at is highly explicit, maybe a bit suggestive. It just analyzes your screenshots to see what you're looking at, and then puts all that in a report and sends your report to you and your accountability partners. With iPhone, it can only detect your screenshots in the Covenant Eyes app. It has its own browser app, or Safari when you have the extension enabled. So that's one drawback on iPhone. If you have Android, it looks at everything you do all the time. Now, this leads me to my second portion of this plan. There are ways to confuse the screen accountability stuff and get around there. So the second point of this plan is to set up a brick phone. Basically, what you're going to do is you're going to set your phone up to where you can make calls, do texts, maybe play a couple games, but that's it. I'm deadly serious. That's it. You don't need your email on that phone. You're getting rid of any and all possible ways to access the internet outside of Covenant Eyes browser or Safari with the Covenant Eyes extension, just to make sure that you can't avoid, if whatever you're going to do, if you're going to keep your browser, make sure that Covenant Eyes can see that. Now, for the first 90 days at least, I highly recommend straight up brick phone. What I did is if there was anything fun on my phone at all, I got rid of it. YouTube, Audible, Spotify, any kind of browsing app. I literally could make calls and send texts, and that was it. That was it. There was nothing else that I could do on that phone. Now, an added benefit to that is you will find yourself being much more productive, because there were times when I would be sitting in bed and I would just stare at my phone, thinking there's got to be something fun on here, and there was not. And I would set my phone down and read a book. So there's an added benefit into this. And I'm going to add this third point in before I go into my reasoning as to why we're being so drastic. You're going to remove all potential problem sources. This is movies, video games, anything and everything that you find yourself turning to access porn, even if it's what we would call mild porn. Now, this may take a little bit, because these things don't come to our mind in the immediate of us thinking about it. It's when we're a week in, 2 weeks in, and our body's craving that dopamine, where we start getting desperate and looking for these things. If you fall, if you go and you go back on the plan in these couple weeks, it's okay. Just make sure that you remove that source that you got your pornography from. What I ended up doing is I got rid of our Xbox. I put our Xbox away. I think I gave it to my brother-in-law for a while. Same thing with our Roku stick. I just put our TV up. And let me tell you, we had it up for a couple of months, and we didn't miss it. We were a lot more productive, and our house was much cleaner, which is a plus. So you're probably sitting back and thinking, Phil, why in the world are you being so darn dramatic with this thing? I mean, goodness, it wasn't that bad, was it? Well, first of all, yeah, it kind of was. And I didn't want any way for me to access any of this. And I'll tell you why this plan is so drastic. It's because I believe it's based on Scripture. There's a verse in Matthew, I believe it's Matthew 5:29, where Jesus is saying, if your eye offends you, pluck it out. If your hand offends you, or offending there meaning if it causes you to do wrong, cut it off. For it's better for you to enter into heaven missing an eye or missing a hand than it is for you to enter hell whole. Now, I don't believe that, and I don't believe any Bible student seriously believes that Jesus was there literally telling you to literally pluck out your eye and cut off your hand. But I do believe that he was using such strong language there for a reason. And that reason being, we need to be willing to do what it takes to live a holy life before God. And if that means, and honestly, nowadays, if you tell somebody, hey, you need to set up a brick phone, for a lot of folks, that kind of is like cutting off their hand. We've become so attached to these stupid devices that we carry around in our pockets. We do this so that there is absolutely no access whatsoever to pornography. And another reason this is so drastic is it kind of has to be. Think about it this way. If I'm a drug addict and I'm hooked on meth or heroin or cocaine, I'm usually surrounded by people who are also hooked on whatever drug. I go and visit a drug dealer. I probably know a few of them. And so if I want to stop doing drugs, it would behoove me to stop hanging out with those friends, to not hang around my former drug dealer. Maybe surround myself with some people who want to help me on my journey away from drugs. I definitely need to keep my distance from my old life. Now, this is kind of a silly example, but a drug addict does not walk around with a drug dealer in his pocket. It's hard for, even if you're a small fella, it's hard for you to fit inside a pants pocket. And yet for the porn addict, we carry our dealer with us everywhere on a daily basis. It needs to stop being our dealer. You need to cut off any and all access to anything that would even remotely resemble pornography if you are going to truly heal. Now, you may be asking, and this is fourth point, give yourself time to rewire and heal. Well, how long does this take? Most scientists agree that it'll probably take 30 days at least for your brain to rewire. So what's happening? You have to understand the science behind what's happening. What's happening is your brain, there's a gland up in there that produces a chemical called dopamine. Dopamine is what makes you feel good. And when you do something that usually is good, your brain produces dopamine. So eating sweets. Times used to be very hard for humans. And so if we got to eat something that was high fat content, tasted really good, the body wanted more of that, because who knows when we're going to eat again. I can store fat for a long time. So yeah, that's really good. So we get a dopaminergic response from eating donuts. Same thing with porn. Our brain gives us a dopaminergic response to porn. Now, what's tricky here is the dopaminergic response that a fellow would receive from watching pornography, especially when it's coupled with masturbation to orgasm. The dopaminergic response that you get from that is greater than the dopaminergic response you would get from having sexual relations with your spouse. Now, if you are married, that's a big problem, and that is what will ruin your marriage, or at least will lead to that. So we definitely need to put the kibosh on that. But what ends up happening is your dopamine level rises above what it should be naturally, and then crashes below what it would be naturally. And so after the fact, you feel much worse. And then your body begins to crave that dopamine just to try to bring it up to baseline. And so the longer you watch porn, the longer you masturbate, your dopamine base level is below what it naturally should be. And so your brain is constantly seeking to bring it up to try to hit that baseline. What ends up happening is the channels of your decision-making process gouge into your prefrontal cortex. Now, your prefrontal cortex is your fight or flight, rapid decision-making processes. There's not really a whole lot of thinking involved in your prefrontal cortex. So when you first start watching porn, you have that angel on your shoulder and the demon on the other shoulder, and you have that conversation, right? Do I really want to watch porn? No, you don't. You're going to have all these things, but then you watch porn, and so that channel gets driven a little bit deeper, and it gets driven a little bit deeper until finally your brain says, I feel really bad. I want to feel good. I know porn makes me feel good, so we're going to watch porn, and the decision is made without you even thinking about it. And so we need to give ourselves time for our brains to literally rewire themselves and go on kind of a dopamine detox. So our brain will rewire, the decision-making channels will get redone, you'll have more decision-making authority in whether or not you actually watch porn, and your dopamine levels will return to their natural baseline. I say give yourself 90 days. Just do it it's just 3 months, 90 days. If you can make it through 90 days, you're probably going to be on a course for success here. Now, I'm going to be very frank and honest with you. You may be at a point where you're just going to need to stay with this plan for the rest of your life. I'm beginning to understand that I'm probably, at the very least, almost there. I can't trust myself with my phone. So I'm to the point now where I'm probably just going to have a brick phone for the rest of my life. And I'm okay with that. And you need to be okay with that. Because there are some things in life that are much more important than having YouTube on your phone, than having internet access on your phone. You can check your email on a home computer. You don't have to have everything that comes with a smartphone. And you're going to need to make the decision of what is more important to me. Is the convenience of modern technology more important to me than a holy life, than victory over this stuff, than success in my marriage? So you need to make the decision for yourself. What is more important to me? Is having a little bit of convenience in my pocket worth more to me than living the life free of pornography, the life that I really want? You need to make that decision for yourself. I understand it's going to be a little bit difficult. I understand. I've told people trying to send me links to things, and I look and I'm going to tell them, just email it to me. And they give me weird looks, and that's okay. I would rather be free of this monster that I've let rule my life for 13 years than have a little bit of convenience in my pocket. I think if you give it a try, you will come to the same conclusion too.
Thank you for listening to the Overcomers Initiative podcast. You can find the Overcomers Initiative on Spotify and Apple Podcast, and be sure to follow the Overcomers Initiative on Facebook, where you can engage in a community of like-minded overcomers. If you would like to reach out, please feel free to message me on Facebook or email me at overcomerm529@gmail.com. That's overcomer, the letter M529@gmail.com. Remember, Revelation 21:7 says, "He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son." Once again, friend, thank you for listening, and God bless you until next time.